Well, I do believe we are recording, and it's end of
Perfect.
May. End of May already. And
Good to go.
so that what I was thinking was asking you a few more questions about this
Yep.
um rhythms of consciousness model, or as what did I call it? I called it uh awareness mapping. And but what I learned, and I'm going to ask you a few questions about this because what you just gave me and I have on the screen right here is some of the text
Yep.
you guys have been writing on your whiteboard while you sort of brainstorm, and you have a whole other whiteboard now filled, which you're going to take a photo and send to me.
Yes.
But I'm going to turn it over to you after I just summarize one clarification that I got last week that was really important for me
Yeah.
was that this on the left hand side, this is the basic structure of your model of awareness.
Yep.
And um but Emily was clarified for me that these are related to the three levels of breathing,
Yes.
and I didn't even know that, but now it makes more sense. So correct me if I'm wrong, but in your normal everyday world, you're in the thinking and feeling domain a lot because you're not even paying attention to what's going on. You have this inner dialogue and that makes you
Yep.
feel a certain way. And but if you go into your first breath or into your second breath, maybe, and this is where you're going to have to clarify for me. You now go into the present moment, and that's where you're all you have in the present moment is your thoughts and sensations, right? Like,
In the present moment, no, there is no thoughts or sensations. The first breath covers both thoughts and thinking. They're in the world of time.
okay,
It's that action reaction world, brain activity. The second breath drops us into the void, which is awareness, which is that second chart I've just sent you.
okay,
It's got awareness scribbled in there.
yeah,
And the third one drops us down to the gnosis and pure form.
okay, and now explain the right hand side, because at the same time, the first breath is the first breath. Actually, can you go over that again? Because
Okay.
essentially what you do in your meditation is it's a guided meditation where you ask people to put their awareness in their breathing.
Yeah.
And
So
then once they're fully into the present moment, then you take them into a second breath.
yeah. So what I do, explaining it a little bit more freely,
Hmm.
when I get people to feel their breath, what they're feeling is their current breath, which is involved with brain activity, daily activity. We've done no previous meditation or anything like that. They're just in that action reaction brain that we all have in our daily activity. So they're just feeling the breath that's associated with that. So once I get them in that breath, I get the feeling they're feeling it, they're getting used to it, they're in rhythm with it. Then I get them to feel underneath the first breath to see if there's a deeper breath the body wants to breathe at or draws us to breathe at. So essentially looking for an inner sensation of being drawn into something that is deeper than the brain activity. That's where we drop through. Everybody on that one generally gets to the void or awareness. I don't tell them that's what it is. They just find the breath and they breathe with it. I get them to explore the sensations, the space that they're in. Um, just
So
to
so so dropping into the second breath is um essentially the first time that they're becoming aware of their awareness.
essentially, I
And that's
don't
in
use
the
any of the,
void.
essentially that's what it is. I don't use any of these terms. I just get them to explore the breath as they find it. So they're getting used to listening to themselves and listening to their own personal experience. We don't put any words or descriptions because A, that can bring brain activity, but it can also so lead to interpretation. Whereas I'm just wanting to explore the current experience in that breath. We're not labeling or doing anything in particular. They're just finding what they're finding. This is one of the keys to self-exploration. We don't go in with concepts or words or theory. We go into the personal experience. Everybody's personal experience has their own personal variation to some degree, but most of these spaces in the second and third breath are universal because we're exploring a space that essentially, for the most part, doesn't know separation. The third breath definitely does not know separation. The second one, being awareness, is the observer mind. So it still has an aspect of perceived separation. You know, there is the observer and the observed. It's awareness that is aware of, so it is that observer mind.
Yeah, that's a very important part of my experience when you lead me through your meditation. But we're going to go to the right-hand side in a second, but I wanted to see if I can recapitulate that. In the first breath, you're really in your everyday consciousness. You're saying, oh yeah, breathing. Oh, okay, just going to breathe naturally. And you still have thoughts and feelings, and you're thinking and having feelings. You have thoughts and sensations. But when you guide the meditator into the second breath, you're really trying to get them into, as you've been just describing, a different state of consciousness, and it's about awareness. And then, so in the third breath, and you can do this, as Corey said, she's amazed at how quickly you can induce this in someone, because as a leader, you are in those states while you are explaining or talking or guiding them. And sort of there's a resonance thing happening between you, the guide, and the meditator. So we have spent no time talking about this stuff at the bottom yet. And I imagine there's some pretty interesting stuff to talk about. But essentially, when you get into the third breath, this is where you are starting to experience a different state of consciousness that has its own sensations and perceptions.
Yes. So we've got brain sensations and perceptions, smell, taste, touch, you know, whatever. We're used to those standard five senses. Everybody thinks that's what we've got. When you get an awareness, I get to explore the sensations and perceptions there. I use those words because they're not focusing on any particular sensation. They're just finding, because everybody finds it. There's a different range of sensations and perceptions there. And then we drop into the third breath, there's another range of sensations and perceptions again. So,
and you can tell me what they're like because they're experiential and hard to put in words.
Totally. One person I dropped into the third breath recently just described, they can't put it into words. There's no words for it.
Okay, and can you lead us through a description of this third breath area where there's knowing and form? And these arrows, I still don't know why we have. I guess we have sort of cognition and emotion. We have thoughts and feelings are the two columns here, and they all feed into the middle.
Now those arrows indicate that direction is essentially, it looks two-directional there, but it's essentially multi-directional. Information can come in, information can go out. Our attention can come in and it can go out, depending on where our attention is, which can go up and down or in and out of these places. It's up to us. This is where we, in standard breath meditation, we learn to be aware of the breath. And then we learn to pay attention to the beginning of the breath, the middle of the breath, bottom of the breath, the turn of the breath, left lung, right lung, top of the lungs, middle of the lungs. We're practicing shifting awareness and focusing awareness. So when we get used to that, we get used to when we're in the states, we can actually direct what we're doing. But we do it within the state itself. We don't have to go back out to the brain and say, oh, I'm now going to shift my attention, whatever, because that would defeat the purpose.
I
We're
got you.
learning to direct within the state. The first Buddhist teacher that I had, he described it as first we become aware of the breath, then we learn to become the breath, and then we go beyond the breath.
Okay.
So that's the same as the 3 breaths. So the first one, we become aware of it. The second one, we become the breath. We're in the experience of it, which is the awareness, the void, aware of. The third one, we go beyond it. And how far we go beyond it is up to us.
Now, what is the symbolism of these 2 circles at the bottom?
Right. The one that looks like a sun is
Yeah.
essentially, that's the creative source. That's unconditional love. That's the love that is the creation of all things on any level, physical and non-physical thing. Anything that can be perceived is essentially a thing, thus an element of creation. We think, a lot of people think, oh yeah, the created universe, planets, stars, galaxies, whatever. But there's a realm of non-physical activity and consciousness and perception that's available as well. But they, in my interpretation, they are still things because they can be labeled, described, and perceived.
Okay.
Going beyond the sun is essentially where I found pure consciousness. A lot of people looking from the world of creation towards that love and pure consciousness, I've heard various people describe it as one and the same thing. When you're looking from the world of creation at it, they do appear to be one. But when you drop through that creative source, that unconditional love, into pure consciousness, I find love disappears. So that creative element, pure consciousness is just pure consciousness. Otherwise, it wouldn't be pure. It'd be pure consciousness and 10% of, creation. Whereas it's not. It sort of separates, somehow it's projected part of itself off.
So
And
is that where this pure form comes from?
when something's created, it has pure intent, pure intention. In its originally created form. It's what I find is that with that 3 breath meditation that we've got recorded already, we go up to source consciousness into the moment we were first ever created from source consciousness. So it's that moment we were brought into creation. So we feel that, we perceive that, we breathe with it, we get used to it. And then we feel the journey we went on as we were sent out to the world of creation. And that drops us into how we received by the earth's energy to then be brought through to physical form through our birth parents, or whatever form we were born in, because some people experience themselves, they had lives before human form. Will I go into that? I can. Some people, there was a lot of things created on this planet before humans appeared. Some people experience incarnations in those forms or shapes, or even with myself, I can remember 2 experiences as rock.
Really?
So you sort of sit around for a while, but you have a lot of experience.
I had a few jokes that came up, but I thought that'd be inappropriate. Okay, so say a word about knowing and gnosis.
To me, when you go there, it depends on how open you are. The first time I went there, no, I'll start with a small description first. When you go into the knowing, you can go in with the knowing of a particular subject that you might be wanting to look at. Sometimes I'll get people who have issues with fear to do the 3 breath meditation. As I take them in the first breath, they're aware of the fear, it's alive, it's vibrant, it appears real. Drop them into the second breath, they're aware of it, but not caught up in it. So they start to get a perception, yes, there is fear, but it's out there. I'm aware of it, but they feel at first stage of what I would call detachment from it.
Right.
It's something they can observe, but not be caught up in. Then I drop them into the third breath, which has a greater sense of expansiveness and overall picture of things. And most people experience the fear from that perspective is to be insignificant in the
Mm-hmm.
greater scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
So for somebody who's got a big fear issue, which can happen with PTSD and various other things, shock, um, or if they're brought up in an abusive situation, which is still PTSD,
Yeah.
um, it's a great way of giving them perspective outside of it so they can start to live the experience of being free of fear or
Mm-hmm.
free of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just one of the tools that I use with it. Sometimes I have to drop them into the third breath. If they're extremely caught up, then I take them back up to the second to look at it from the second once they've got a greater sense of detachment. Even though in the knowing and the gnosis, there really is no disconnection. There is no perception of separation. We can perceive various forms, but we don't perceive ourselves as being separate from them. So you
Okay.
can feel another planet, you can feel another galaxy, you can feel asteroids, comets, other races, other beings,
And
whatever.
I'm imagining that that's depends on the level of the ability of the meditator. Um,
Yeah,
you might go there more naturally, or maybe Corey might go there more naturally. I'm still playing with it. I'm still trying to go quiet and listen and get that kind of download. Um, but
yeah.
that helps me. Okay, so I'll come back to
I want to
maybe.
blow that up a little bit first, just to give you the bigger version of the knowing and the gnosis.
Okay,
When I first went there and dropped into it, and this has happened with various other people I've taken there, when you drop into the knowing, you know that if you're open enough, you know that you know everything, literally. Now that doesn't mean we know what to do with it at that point. Just yeah, I won't say just about everybody I've taken there. The first statement is the same as mine. It's like, oh, holy shit.
yeah.
Because once you know, everybody so far questions where they want to know that they know.
Oh, so I see. Okay.
It can be very, very confronting. Do
Yeah.
not go there lightly. Do not go looking for it unless you naturally open up to it. It
Okay.
is
That's a reasonable
impacting and huge.
caution.
And you really want to do it. If you're going to do that, do it with somebody who knows their stuff and knows how to do this.
It's like having a sitter.
Yeah, yeah. You want a mentor, somebody who's been experiencing or been experienced with this. Um, there's not many people I would put in that category.
Okay.
But for me,
Now,
using it, yeah, carry on. Your turn.
well, I'm moving over to the right side now
Yep,
because we're going to revisit the whole model because there's the veil of fear at the top and there's the void right there and there's the dot, the circle at the bottom.
yep,
And I'm thinking of this in the context of uh using this specifically with women who have had traumatic abuse
yep,
and trafficked women and missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada are kind of the
yep,
focus of Corey.
yep,
And and so speak to it at that level, that it's not while all of us have had our difficult journey moments where this model would be helpful,
yep,
uh, there are people who have had horrendous experiences that would be using this model to help them deal with something. For instance, like when you say, I allow them to get a little more detached from their fear. Well,
yep.
I can imagine for some of them that's easier said than done.
Yeah, because we've got two things that I look at. There is what is known as standard fare. Um, Go to step on a road, not really thinking, a horn toots, and you look to see if you're about to be hit by something. That's what I call a reactionary fear. It's not preset, it's just sitting around waiting for its moment to have its 15 minutes of fame. And, we use it appropriately. We realize it's not about us. We can still walk across the road and stop paying attention to our iPod. Um, Carry on with the day. The fear arises, it goes down again. But then we have fear of the fear, where we're afraid of the fear arising. That becomes obsessive fear because we feel out of control, which is what trauma based often does. We
Yeah.
feel unresourced, we feel disempowered, disenfranchised. It's like all our ability to achieve, do, or act has been taken away from us because somebody, if they've been in an intense situation, especially with trafficking or CPTSD, they can lose all sense of ability to make decisive decisions, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I use the breathing model to drop them out of that state first without saying that's what we're doing. I just use it as a perception place. Once they're outside of it, they can start looking back at it from what is perceivably a detached view, but yet it's a connected realm we're in. When you're in consciousness, consciousness does not perceive separation, but it does not perceive separation from that which is real. When we go back in the world of the ego, where money, trafficking, personal gain, perception of separation exists, that's where all those activities take place, physical realm activities take place. There is conscious realm activities, how our mind and brain works. Now, the brain is brain activity, which I call ego. The mind is the in the moment mind.
Okay.
That's how I define between the two. So, brain activity happens in time, the mind works in the moment. They're two separate things.
Okay,
The
that's
moment
good.
works in presence, awareness, and consciousness. It can see what's happening, it notices what's happening, but it is not caught up in it. It does not have the egoic emotions. And awareness and consciousness do not perceive disempowerment or disconnection from that perspective. So that's a huge difference I find.
Okay.
Um,
That helps me a lot.
yeah,
And we see Emily coming in.
yeah. Now, if you go in the middle of the chart that we've got the handwriting, you've got desiring, reductionist, complexity.
Yeah.
The reductionist is the further you go into that realm of time and towards the fear, you reduce all your abilities, all your ability to sense, so your sensations, and above it is the word energy thief.
Okay.
You become more disconnected from the empowerment, the in the moment, the fully energized state, which is in the moment, which gives us an ability to act, decide, and achieve in a way that the brain does not have, because the brain operates in a disconnected perception. It's in a separated perception. So the more we work in the moment, hi, Emily, um, the more what I call empowered and present we become.
Okay. Very
And
cool. Emily,
that's where oh, sorry, go for it.
hi, Emily. We're just going to march in, and you can add your thoughts as we go. I was explaining to Chris that maybe we'd record a little bit of a description because you clarified for me that this model is related to the first breath, the second breath, and the third breath, that you're doing this while you're meditating. But then there is some integration process that goes on afterwards that would involve writing and healing and I'm just trying to get a little bit of a better understanding of that. And so we've literally just started looking at this photograph of, I gather, I presume you may have been involved in writing these words down on the whiteboard. And but there's another whiteboard full of more words, so we're trying to capture all of it. And so this is the first time that I've actually um, dove into this text, and Chris started me with desiring reductionist and complexity. And we're thinking, we just had a wonderful little visit with Corey, but Corey is specifically working with traumatized women, like trafficked women and missing and murdered Indigenous people, communities. And she's got a little, well, I don't know. She's got some good news about creating a program with Indigenous people in 3 different provinces in Canada. And there's a spot for this in that healing process, and maybe also for the rhythms of nature stuff that Charlotte has. So I asked Chris, can you step through this text in the context of someone who has been a victim, who have suffered trauma, who carries these fears within them? And so Chris was just explaining how he can get them into the second breath and start to become detached from those fears as a little bit more of an observer. And that's not always that easy for someone who's been traumatized. So he might have to come back up to second breath and let them work some more at that before they bring them down. So Chris, you're throwing me in here with some new ideas, including these arrows heading towards ego and away from ego, up towards the veil of fear, or towards the void.
Yeah, where I've got that arrow you were just indicating, you've got energy thief, desiring, reductionist, and complexity. The further you follow that arrow up, and oops, I've just gone small screen for some reason.
Oh,
Yeah, as you follow that up, that sense of energy thief just increases. The further you go into the egoic thinking process, brain activity, the less energy you feel is available. You become disconnected from what I call free-flowing energy, which is found in the moment. When you're in the moment, there is 100% of creation's energy available. You're in that infinite source. As you go into the world of separation, you disconnect from that infinite source and become dependent on personal supply, that which I carry with me.
right.
The more connected our perceptions are, more we have elements of that infinite source still available. But the further we go into egoic thinking, the more we separate ourselves, reducing the amount of energy available.
Okay.
Some people live a life, oh, yeah, I'll just finish this, but live a life where they work with the energy held in the body that they got from birth, and they just quietly running it down as they go through their life. So yeah, back to you, Jeff.
Okay, so I do understand that completely, and it's about, we are connected to source, but we can be cut off from source,
Yes.
and then we have our own. Then we have to rely on our own energy sources,
Yeah.
and they can be
Now,
depleted.
yeah. Now, even though we're using the term separate from source, the separation is just a perception, which is an illusion in itself. It's the illusion of separation. It's just a very persistent illusion. So what we're learning to do is see the difference between the perception of separation and the perception of connection. And I'll take people through each experience and to get in touch with which one is actually real, because both cannot exist in the same time space. So we look at which one is real, what's that based on? And this is where the understanding of time comes in and perception of separation through brain activity, which
Mhm.
we've covered before. How, I touch the tip of my finger, that's in the moment. By the time the signal's halfway down the finger, it's already in the past. Thus, perception of separation from the initial experience. And by the time the signal gets to the brain, it's well and truly in the past.
Now,
It's just, yeah, carry
does
on.
it matter on this drawing
Yep.
that thinking and feeling are below the veil of fear?
No, it's just where I wrote it. It ideally where it is above the line is more
Yeah,
indicated.
okay. And
Um,
the veil of fear, I still need more help understanding, but it is related to the ego's defense mechanisms.
essentially, fear is really an intriguing one because when you're below it, it's not an issue. When you're above it, it's a veil because we're caught up in the storytelling mind or
Yeah.
storytelling brain activity, and that can have multiple layers of story. And when you're perceiving from those stories, they can have various fears attached.
Hmm.
Those fears, when we're coming from that place, we don't usually see beyond the fear. The fear can be small, gradual, to all consuming, but it sets up a veil that tints anything below that veil of fear. It's like having our own rose tinted glasses on, but they're fear tinted glasses.
Yeah, gotcha. All
So
right.
everything,
Like a
yeah,
perception.
It's
yes,
It's a way of perceiving something that's in front of you. But
yeah,
then
yeah,
when you drop into that second breath, you're perceiving it from the place of presence, if that makes
yes,
sense.
yeah. And that's another clarification that I just got, that the veil of fear is like the rose-colored glasses, only it's hell-colored glasses.
I love that one. What fire and brimstone meeting his
Yeah,
glasses, it throws a little meteor or something across a
and
brimstone.
everything you see is colored by that fear, and you interpret it and you say, yeah, see, there it is.
Yeah. So somebody above that veil of fear can be so caught up in the fears of things, especially in the traumatic experiences you're talking about. It's so can be so debilitating. They don't even understand it's possible to go beyond the fear anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
Yeah.
what we're teaching is a greater sense of perception or view of perception that takes them beyond that without actually telling them that first. Because if we tell you, I'm going to take you beyond your fear, they could have all sorts of reactions to it.
Right.
Now, one of the issues I find itself is fear. Most people think fear protects us, and I say it doesn't. Fear protects itself. The example I use of that is the person that steps out on the road, sees a truck coming, and goes, oh, they get caught up in the fear of being hit by the truck and they freeze.
Which is
That,
dangerous.
yeah, that is actually sacrificing us for the maintenance of that level of fear.
Okay.
And as the person freezes on the road, sure enough, 10 minutes later, because the truck was actually that far away, the truck eventually hits them. But it's that thing. That's what that freeze reaction can do. It can be out of proportion for the actual situation.
Mhm.
So we learn to,
And that fear is, I'm reminded of Pain Body from Eckhart Tolle.
yeah, yep. Some people can be afraid of pain. Some use it in other ways because there's certain, if I be direct, sexual stimulations that involve a certain amount of pain induction. There are people who pierce themselves with hooks and have themselves suspended for the rush they get when they get lower down and the hooks are taken out. It's not one I've been interested in trying myself, but
Now,
you don't have to have a fear or an aversion to pain some people desire it because it's one of the few ways they actually feel something.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that too.
So we have various ins and outs with pain and fear. One doesn't necessarily follow the other. But as
So
I say,
take me
carry on.
back, take me back and step me through some more of this text. So
Right.
I've learned that um
Oh, here it is. Yep.
don't really know why the word desiring is there, but I do understand that the more you get involved in ego,
Yep. Okay.
you
Desiring is
yeah,
the more we follow that arrow up, you feel more separate from things. Therefore, the more separation we create, the more desire gets generated for those things.
okay,
And this is part of where desire comes from. It's helping people understand desire is created from separation.
okay,
So the more we go up into the realm of separation, the more we enhance the sense of desiring. It's like I said to a friend recently, when I'm in my head, I miss them. When I'm in my heart, I appreciate them.
right.
Heart is in the moment, conscious centered perception.
Hmm.
There's no sense of missing in that place because I don't feel separate from them.
Okay. I like that. I mean,
Yeah,
I get that. And as I look at some of these other words in here, you know, this is like victim consciousness, disease separation,
yeah,
perception of attack can lead to grievances. Am I coming from a loving place? What I'm focusing on right now is this kind of generally this notion of being a victim and
yep,
how that is kind of like the source of this particular fear. Let's say we're imagining someone who
yeah,
has some trauma.
yeah. Because usually, if say you're in an abduction situation, the abductors work to disempower you at every step possible. So you stop making independent decisions.
Right.
Everything is dependent on them. You don't act without their permission. If you act out of line, you can get punished in various ways. It's disempowering the person so they stop acting independently. Um, that's the way I understand it and perceive it. Anybody that's in a process of constant abuse, and it's not just abduction, it can be an abusive parent,
Yeah.
abusive partner, narcissistic relationship. It can be various aspects. Even employer employee has elements of that sometimes,
Right.
where somebody wants to exercise power and control over staff and separation.
Yeah. They make your life
Um,
miserable.
yeah, really.
Really, the perpetrator and the victim are both one and the same because perpetrators come from victimhood eventually, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Or they
And
started out as victims and they've
Yeah.
become the perpetrators
yeah,
by modeling or by seeing that's their way out.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the big thing I found recently that this works on is being less than 100% empowered and less than 100% present. The more disempowered you become, the more the trauma impacts. When I was meditating recently, I got into a place where I was 100% present, 100% here, and I was just so present. The perception of trauma was disappearing off in the background on its own. I noticed that as an after effect.
I'm
And
gonna
that's
jump
where,
off the call now, guys.
okay, catch you, Emily.
I'll,
Thanks.
I'll listen to the recording.
Okay. Good to see you.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
How do
Bye.
I get out? Don't know how to.
Down
Oh,
the,
there we
Let me
go.
out.
down
Look for
Bye.
the red button.
should be down the bottom right-hand corner somewhere. There we are. She's got it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've got up in the top line there, this victim consciousness. Yeah, written there. It always has elements of fear with it. Now, being aware of fear to me is not real. Fear is false emotion appearing real. Is
Right.
the acronym I use with it.
Mm-hmm.
What that relates to is fear is something, it's a projection of what we feel is going to happen and are resistant to that perception of something going to happen.
As
You know,
if it
don't-
is happening.
Yeah. So we're caught up in current reaction to a perceived future perception, which is not here, therefore not real. Now, it doesn't mean the activity doesn't have the option of happening, but we're coming from a disempowered perspective. When we come from an empowered, we start looking at what actions, what processes we can use, how to get into an empowered place. We look at sidestepping. What can I achieve in this place? You know, if you're sliding down the side of a hill, what can I do to arrest my slide? If it's an ice slide, you've got your ice axe, you put that in the ground, you start slowing yourself down. If you're on a scree slope, you'll look at what you can do to increase surface mass to stop sliding down a scree slope. We're becoming empowered in what for some could be a disempowered situation.
And
So
how,
empowerment,
how do you become more empowered in that situation?
a lot of it I find is just learning to become present, acknowledging the present moment consciousness is one aspect, but just being more present in it. Yes, I'm on the slide. This is happening. This is the situation. What tools and resources do I have available? How can I implement those tools and resources? Or how can I increase my tools and resources? If I'm sliding down a slope and I pass a random stick on the side, I might grab that stick and use that to try and dig into the ground to arrest the slide. We look for empowerment. I might have a pack on, or my pack might be sliding beside me. I can grab the pack, put the pack sideways to improve surface mass to once again slow down the slide. We look for empowerment tools in the particular situation.
Okay, and where does that fit in while we're talking on this sheet of paper?
When we're going below the veil of fear, this perception of separation, the more separation we feel from things, the more disempowered. So as we go, follow the arrow downwards towards the moment, we start letting go of our sense of separation, noticing the environment we're in and how we can use that in an empowered way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if we go down to desiring and reductionist, forget desiring, but more reductionist, the more we go follow that arrow up towards the veil of fear, we reduce our capacity, our confidence, our resources. So when we go to follow the top arrow down, going towards the moment or the void or the awareness, we're going in an empowering direction. We're going closer to the moment, which is closer to the perception of reality, closer to the perception of the situation as it is, without interpretation of fear. We're going beyond the fear. We're already below the veil of fear, and we're going towards the moment, that sense of connection where we have full presence and full acknowledgement of the moment.
And now, that is in the void awareness. And you say that there are these decision point arrows.
Yeah. And decision point with the arrows going up and down, that's where we're deciding whether we go into the world of time or more towards consciousness itself, which is conscious presence. Conscious presence is fully in the moment, fully in touch, all senses available from consciousness senses, awareness senses. It doesn't tend to use brain sensation because that involves going into time.
Mm-hmm.
So in that realm of consciousness and awareness, you're not using brain sensations.
Right, which is your whole point about there being a whole other set of sensations and perceptions, another set of senses.
Yeah, you can be aware of them, but not caught up in them. But you certainly can't, consciousness does not use them at all. Awareness, it can be aware of them, but once again, not caught up in them, which is quite interesting. There's various exercises I've done with that to achieve that place. Now, when you're in awareness, you're still aware of both the world of time and the world of consciousness, but you're not in either of those. You're in what I call the doorway between the two realms. As soon as you drop through awareness into consciousness, it's its own world. It doesn't really have much to do with the world of time at all, and it does not use the worldly sensations.
And so you distinguish between awareness and consciousness.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, when you drop below there into consciousness, you see this desireless.
Kindness, gentleness, expansion, simplistic.
Yeah. Now that's the opposite of desiring, reductionist complexity. The
Yeah.
more you go into the world of time and brain activity, the more story gets added, the more complexity. Once you go below the line of awareness, you're getting into that gentleness, expansion. It's expansionist. It's just fully involving. You see everything's interrelated. It's just an amazing place to be.
And these other words would include things like the whole self, the big self, the unlimited self, the
Totally.
empathy.
Yeah.
And I'm reading sideways here. Openness.
Yep.
And likewise, the further you go away from awareness into consciousness, you're gaining energy. In other words,
Yes.
by being more connected to source.
Yep. So you see the arrow there has a plus sign
Yeah.
at this point, and the arrow in the other side of awareness has a net minus sign. So when people talk about positive and negative, it generally is interpreted as a good, bad, right, wrong, stuff like that. To me, it's not. It's just one takes you away from your energy supply, your connection, your source. One takes you towards your energy supply, your source, your consciousness. That's, is this taking me towards? Is this taking me away from? And that's what it's about. When I've sat with it, that's what it is before story is added.
Okay. So now
Story, judgment.
I'm
Yep.
going to ask you to keep going further down and integrate the bottom half now.
Okay. Once you go below the level of knowing, when you know that you know something, say I'm focusing on a glass of water, from awareness, I'm aware of the glass and the water in the glass. When I go into knowing, I'm no longer the observer of the glass of water. I become the glass and the water in the glass and the space the glass is in.
Okay.
Once you go below the knowing and the pure form, because I now know I am the glass and the water and the space that the glass and the water is in, I go down to the source of energy, which is the creative source, and I become the consciousness that created both the glass and the water, not just as an object in space and time, but as the whole process of where the water evolved from, came from, originated, and the glass itself is like, oh yeah, somewhere along the line I'm silica on a beach somewhere
Yeah.
that got collected and melted into this thing that has been determined to be glass, and the rest of my family is still on the beach being washed around by the waves or whatever. It's an interesting thing. There is literally no separation of process anywhere.
Right. So this is the sense that people talk about becoming one with the universe.
Yeah, literally.
And which is a state to aspire to, but not all people can get there without practice. And
yeah, without practice and tools.
yeah.
As I say, the breathing meditation is a great way to get into this area. Now, you can decide whether to edit this out or not. The third breath is usually the extent I take most people. Glossia and I were playing the other day and I got her into the fifth breath. Yeah. And we have found, Glossia asked the question, which I hadn't asked, is there more? And I hadn't looked beyond the fifth breath because it was pretty complex. Um, and we've now tracked to where I can't find any more. The point I couldn't find any more was the 13th breath.
Yeah.
I'll
And
let you figure out what that's
well,
like. It's
I have this suspicion that as you evolve, there will be more.
I can't see anything beyond the 13th at this stage. I
Well,
don't
when
get a
you
sense of
become an
anything.
ascended master, you might see 100 of them.
Possible, but the ascended master, as most people think of it, is down the creative center. Once you know that place, you can create from there. That's what most people would think of as ascended master. Even the knowing, gnosis level and the pure form level for some people fits that perception of ascended master. The void, the awareness, is the area which people interpret as enlightenment.
Okay.
But just being in the void isn't enlightenment, but being able to direct it more towards the thinking brain, the world of time, and the world of the moment, and this sense of being that exists in the moment. There is a phrase I've got there, whole self, big self, their early description, which don't completely fit because there's no sense of self as a separate self. Even though we perceive a self, we don't feel separate from other selves because we feel and recognize we're all part of the same
Yeah.
life pool.
It's like the word self implies separation.
Yeah. Whereas I'm inclined to use the word now being. So it's whole being, big being,
Oh, yeah. I like
and
that.
the big being and unlimited being is that which is not restricted by the world of time. The word big, I I could drop that word out now
How
and
about
take it. Yeah,
higher self?
you could. Yeah, higher being, higher self. Yeah,
I mean, there is the phrase higher self that I use.
yeah,
I think of like I'm the avatar. Jeff is embodying
yeah.
the avatar, but there's a higher self,
Which there is.
and
Yeah,
and that's the one that might be existing simultaneously in many different lives, but that's my oversoul, so to speak.
yeah. And you can actually talk and have conversations with that higher self. It's quite possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I can't talk directly to a person, sometimes I'll talk to their higher self.
Oh, I was
If
thinking you were talking to your own higher self.
you can
Oh,
do that too. Um, it,
interesting.
yeah, it can be handy with some perceptions of trauma. It's a way you can communicate to a part of the person that may be having difficulty going beyond the trauma. You can talk to the higher self and drop stuff in there or interact with stuff there in a way that will then introduce to the body. And I've had experiences with that where I talk to a person, you find several months later they're starting to integrate the information that was dropped in the higher self.
Well, that's
So
good because I was just going to ask you, how does this relate to someone with a specific dramatic trauma that is affecting them? And and so some people might say, well, it my first thought was they're saying, look, I just got everyday problems, man. I don't need to connect to the universe here.
yeah,
I don't need to be the water in my glass. I just want to enjoy the water.
yeah,
And but you're saying in the last minute before I asked this question, you're saying that sometimes I found it helpful when someone might not be ready in their consciousness to be experiencing that,
yeah,
that you as a guide can talk to their higher self,
yeah.
and in some sense that would be words that they're hearing through their meditation that they will integrate later. Like,
Um, usually I'm not talking to them verbally at that point. I'm
I
talking to
see.
the higher self in a perception, place of perception.
Okay.
Um, usually, I have aspects of permission for that from the person to, just play with that.
Yeah.
And the higher self has a greater overview of the situation than the person's everyday perception.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's just a way of interacting.
Now, I'm looking at trying to wrap up in the next couple of minutes,
Yep.
and focusing again always on how this tool would be used in a setting at a healing center, or at a workshop that Corey's leading, or even
Okay.
over a Zoom call.
The first thing I look at with all situations is giving the person a sense of their own being. Now, that's just, my own body, my own presence. I've got my feet on the ground, because trauma situations usually take us out of current moment reality into the dynamics of the trauma experience being carried with them. When we're in the moment or more present, even if we're still in time, we can acknowledge that is not currently happening. If I'm sitting here in a room on a couch, I can look up, the ceiling is not falling on my head. At this precise moment, nobody is breaking my door down. I'm not being pushed or abducted into a vehicle. I'm not being drugged. I'm not being tied up. I'm not being gagged. None of these things are happening. So what does it feel like not to have this happening in this moment? We don't have to project it into time yet, just this moment. We start introducing new sensations and perceptions as availability, but we need the person in themselves feeling present. It can be, what's my bum like on the seat? How do my feet feel on the floor? How do my legs feel in front of me? How do the clothes feel on my body? How does my own breath feel? How does it feel to breathe in this moment? We're just having everyday experiences, sensations, and orientations. The idea is to get them into their sense of their own being, their own body, their own presence, right here, right now. Because trauma takes us away from that. We're scanning out there. We're looking for the danger. We're externalized rather than internalized. Once we get internal, that's where empowerment is found. But that is a process. It's a step-by-step process. We look at introducing it at a rate that the client can receive. And that can be tailored to each individual person. Some people get there quickly. Some takes a little bit longer, but it's achievable. It's finding empowerment for the person in the way that works for them.
And it really points out how important it is to do this one-on-one with a guide.
Ideally, yes. There is general overview stuff we can do, like we can do stuff with a group to see how many people that works with. The ones that don't get in the group situation can become part of a one-on-one process. So we can use the group to get to as many people as possible, and then we can do the one-on-one for those who need that level of involvement. And it's
the other thing that I'm becoming aware of is a lot of benefit can be had by giving people's examples of how other people have had experienced it.
Yeah.
And so like I am also thinking with my software cap on, okay,
Yep.
so what's the content? What are they doing? What are they experiencing? They can't have Chris all the time.
Yeah.
And if there are thousands of people, like it needs to be automated and
Yeah.
handheld with some sort of mentor program.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is where, I've developed a short range of tools, as I call it, which are carryable by the person wherever they go. The 3-breath meditation in its simplistic form without elaboration is often a way that the person can just use that tool. I'm in the first breath, I can see my mind's in panic. It's, I'm getting into, full-on panic attack. That's the first breath. Can I find the second breath? Reach below the first breath, second breath. Oh yeah, feeling a slowing down, whatever. It's been able to drop out of that. It's been able to reverse the direction if possible. I'm using panic. Yeah. It's just having simple tools that the person.
That's really good point, that they learn these tools that they use. It's sort of like reframing in cognitive behavioral therapy, like you have these strategies.
Yeah,
You're saying what you'll learn from doing this
Yeah.
is that it's not something you do once and you've learned it. It's something that you then become good at doing.
yeah. Practice, practice, practice. It's hardwiring it into the brain so it becomes automated.
Right.
We can do it any time that we feel ourselves starting to slip towards panic, anxiety, perception of fear. We just settle ourselves down. We
Mhm.
practice it, the easy step before it becomes the big step. It's we start to get used to it as a preemptive tool rather than a full-on flight management tool.
Right. Yeah.
But once we've got it at the beginning step, that preemptive thing, we are more able to apply it when something is in full flight.
Yeah.
Because if something comes out of a blind spot, say somebody running a red light, we might get an immediate full-on panic response, and we've got to manage it or self-regulate at some degree somewhere, so we can remove ourselves from that intersection or whatever's happened from that experience. So
Okay.
yeah,
Well, I could easily move into the I'm interested in the blame, forgiveness, and ownership and empowerment. I think we're going to leave that for the next one.
yep,
And this is really just the first overlay of text
yeah,
to lead our
very much,
discussion. And
yeah,
it'd be good. Maybe you want to do get me a photo of
yeah,
of that board, and we can do the
but
same thing next week.
yeah, because it's got a whole different screed of writing compared to this.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, cool.
we're not done with this, but I think it's good for us for now.
Yeah,
And I'm gonna stop recording. And say that was wonderful. Thank you for stepping me through that.
you're welcome. And yeah, I appreciate too, because it just familiarizes me with things. And it's like the whole self, big self. It's okay, I need to reframe these.
Right.
And it's the thing. To me, this is an evolving process.